Welcome back, everyone. Dillian Whyte versus Moses Itauma today. I've got to be honest with you, this fight hasn't really got me that excited, if I'm honest. I should have made a prediction for this days ago. I've been really busy, but I only make videos when I feel I've got something to say of interest or there's something that's really sparked my interest. And I'm just not massively excited about this fight. I don't know why. To me, it does feel there really has been a hard sell for this and a hard sell for Moses Itauma. I suppose rightly so, because he is sort of described as the second coming of the next big, British and heavyweight star. And the heavyweights are the bigger stars of the sport, the marquee division and all that. But it just really hasn't grabbed me this so far. I suppose it will when I watch it tonight, and I suppose I'll be excited by it. But I don't know. I do feel this has been very forcibly sold, if you like, and it kind of hasn't captured me. But maybe that's me. Maybe I'm a bit long in the tooth. I don't know. Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte he got a lot of criticism for his performance last against Tete, and for me, Dillian Whyte hasn't really been what I would say, good since the rematch win over Povetkin. Sorry, name escaped me. Since then, probably since the Fury fight, Dillian has not been great, and you forget that Dillian's had great wins over the likes of Joseph Parker won, but he's had some good wins. Dillian Whyte, he's a decent fighter, and has been a good fighter. And he was on the fringes of sort of real world title level, and there was a real clamour when he seemed to be being kept out of the picture to fight Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury. So Dillian has been sort of up there, and he's got a good record, but he hasn't been good. Saying that, against Tete, I thought there were flashes of good stuff in there from Dillian. When he let his punches go in combination, his hands were fast. He got hit a lot, which is one of Dillian's problems, always has been. He's never had the greatest defense. He uses a kind of Philly shell, what a type defense, and it's not always worked that well for him. A lot of made is always about the fact that he's been stopped many times by uppercuts, predominantly by uppercuts. And there's always a load of talk about he's susceptible to the uppercut. He's weak when it comes to defending the uppercut, which is true. But I don't think the problem is his issue with uppercuts themselves. I think the problem he has when he defends uppercuts, or his lack of defense to uppercuts, and then his susceptibility to uppercuts, is the fact that he's got lazy feet, technically lazy feet, meaning that he doesn't use boxing footwork all of the time, and when he doesn't, this is when he falls foul, and he tends to be square a lot of the time, and he tends to, again, which is kind of part of his defense, which for me doesn't seem to work, he will lean forward a lot. And he will lean forward, inviting the uppercut. And then a lot of the time when the uppercut comes, he isn't really seeing it until maybe the last minute when it's coming up, because he's not seeing, the inception of the punch, because he goes into that and looks down. And then he leaves his feet very square and in range, and his balance isn't great. You see him when he's being offensive sometimes, he'll put so much into some punches that the momentum almost, it has done on a few occasions, the momentum has carried him over. And again, that's kind of down to misuse of his feet in a lot and body position. So I don't think the problem is really, by proxy, the uppercut is the problem. But I think that stems from the issue that he's kind of got technically lazy feet at a lot of periods. Moses Itauma looks fantastic, albeit against the level of opposition so far. And a lot of people, the big question is that a lot of people want to see answered, or are saying they want to see Moses Itauma hit on the chin, which is going to happen, but you can't blame him for not being hit on the chin. There are stories of him not having a good chin. We don't know that yet, but I can't remember who I was listening to the other day talking about sparring him and being in the gym with him, that he'd been hit on the chin and he's been in heavy spars. Listen, in spars, you get hit on the chin all the time. You do get cracked. And it's not the same as the fight, but a good crack on the chin in sparring can be just as devastating as a good crack on the chin in a real fight. People get dropped in sparring all the time. Moses Itauma does do some really, really wonderful things. A lot of them are, especially his lateral movement, where he will move himself into a position, he'll move round, and his feet are set so well, and his balance is good. Sort of the centre line between his head and where that falls in between his feet, in between his stance, is brilliant sometimes, and it allows him to move round fighters, create the angles, throw a shot, get round, catch it. He looks sublime at doing that sometimes. His movement is so good, so fluid, so natural, so fast. Everything is kind of where it should be in an offensive sense. But there are times where when he throws the backhand, he can overextend that a long way. And then there is a big gap. And a lot of times also when throwing the backhand, his defensive hand in that position or the hand is set to throw the number two, he's sometimes way out of position. He does leave his chin in the air. He does leave his chin in the air quite a bit. And I think it was against Balogun for the final knockdown. He actually took one as, just as he landed his, it was just that his was the lot better, the faster, the better delivered shot, and the more devastating shot with more power. But he does get hit. He is open to be hit. Saying that, when going back to the Tete fight for Dillian Whyte, he was getting hit a lot by Tete, and that doesn't bode well going into a Moses Itauma fight. I was listening to Derek Chisora the other day, or was it yesterday? And Derek said, I really want to see Dylan win because he just likes Dylan, and he would like Dylan to have a really good, notable win in his career, coming at a time which is, you'd say, is the end of his career. Dylan is coming towards the end, although saying that, if he wins, he certainly won't hang up the gloves. And if he loses, he may not hang up the gloves. He may go away and then come back and have another fight. But he is on the final rungs of his career, especially being a relevant heavyweight. And Derek was saying that he would like to see Dylan get the win. And I like Dillian Whyte, and I've said this before, regardless of the PED stuff, I find Dillian Whyte very endearing, and I like Dillian Whyte, I always have done. I would like to see Dillian Whyte win. And I like to see the upset, and I like to see the little guy win. And I would, Moses Itauma, and this is not me hating on Moses Itauma. I like him. I like that confidence. I like his ability, and I think he's going to go on, you would think, to have a really good career. But he can come again. He can come again. And I would like to see Dillian. I'd like to see Dillian pull out the win and pull out the upset. That's just me, just my opinion, just what I'd like to see. But I can't see it. I really can't. A lot of people are saying Dillian should go out and try and take Itauma along and try and drag him into the so-called deep waters. A lot of people are saying he's got to put it on him from the start. I think Dylan would probably last longer by trying to take it long, although I don't think that'd be... although we haven't seen Itauma go past 6 rounds, have we? All his fights have been 6-rounders. So he certainly hasn't been any further than that, indicating, we haven't seen him tested in late wars. Listen, he's young, he's fit. Although saying that, there were a couple of fights, one in particular, I can't remember the name, where he did look like he was blowing quite early. But sometimes when you're eager and enthusiastic and you are letting your hands go, you will end up blowing a little bit, especially if you're trying to force something. But I don't really think there would be issues with his stamina. And other people have said Dillian Whyte's stamina isn't that great. But for the size of Dillian Whyte, for the weight and the body composition he's come in at, I don't think his stamina's been that bad for a guy of that build and coming in quite fleshy a lot of times. So I think Dillian Whyte will last longer if he tries to take it longer, because he's going to be less offensive. And if you're being less offensive, you leave yourself open less. The more offensive you are, the more you leave yourself open. You're throwing more punches, you're generally up closer, and you're leaving yourself open. So I don't really know. I don't see any way really leading to a Dillian Whyte win, if I'm honest. Maybe I'm underplaying Dylan's chances maybe a little bit. I don't know, but you do have to remember there's about a 15-year difference between these two, give or take. And it's a young man's game, essentially. And you've got a young man, a hungry man, a supremely talented man in front of a man who hasn't got the same natural ability. Dylan hasn't. I like Dylan. like I said, I'm a big fan, but he isn't the most naturally gifted. He didn't come into this sport as an out and out boxer. He was kickboxer first, came in late to boxing with little experience really. So everything plays or weighs in favour of an Itauma win, and I don't think you'll see any different. As much as I want to see Dylan win, nothing to make me happy to see Dylan win. And he is being written off. And, you know, if you look with your boxing brain, you'd say correctly so. But I like Dylan Whyte. I'd love to see him win. I don't think he will. I see Moses Itauma winning. He could win early. Moses Itauma could win this inside of 3 rounds, wouldn't be surprised at all. Or it could be a mid to late stoppage. I'd really like to see Dylan put up a good show and come out of this still with some stock rather than his stock hitting the floor after this. But I just, you know, with all the good intention in the world I have for Dillian Whyte, and I want to see Dillian Whyte win this fight, I just can't see it, you know, other than we get into a firefight early. And I think Moses Itauma has said, if I get into a dogfight with Dillian Whyte, I'll lose. You know, Dillian Whyte does in the dogfight have an element to his game which is good, in which he becomes pretty unpredictable. His feet are everywhere, as I said, but sometimes it leads to shots being unorthodox. And a lot of good fighters are better at fighting other good fighters because other good fighters do things more technically correct, and that can be easier to compensate for and defend against and compete against. Whereas a certain amount of unorthodoxy is a little bit random at times, and random can be a lot hard to combat sometimes. But yeah, in short, Moses Itauma, I would imagine by a stoppage. If so, I don't really see this going on points. It could be a Moses Itauma win early, or it could be mid. You know, that's what I'd expect. So yeah. Also on the card, David Adelaide against Filip Hrgović. I said when Daniel Dubois fought Filip Hrgović, I just saw Hrgović out-toughing Dubois. In fact, he didn't. Daniel Dubois had probably one of his career best performances against Hrgović. Adelaide got a lot of criticism for his win over TKV. I didn't think it was that bad. I thought he bided his time. I thought he held back through the shots when he needed to, and I didn't think that was a bad performance. I thought he got a lot of stick for that, and I thought he'd done okay. But I kind of lean towards Hrgović, and I don't know why. Just on his experience, he's fought at a much higher level, and the fact that we know he's very, very tough. Although I do think Hrgović, for a lot of the time, is just right-hand happy, and I think his right hand ain't very good. He lands it a lot, but I don't think technically he's very good. I don't think it's technically very good for him to generate as much power out of it as he could. And I think we saw that with the fact that Daniel Dubois ate them all night quite comfortably. So I quite like both guys. I think this is a harder one to call, probably the hardest one to call on the fight. I would lean towards Hrgović, but the noises coming out of Adelaide's camp are that he's hitting really hard and he's looking really good. So, you know, we will see. I'd lean towards Hrgović. Wouldn't be surprised if an Adelaide win. I'd like to see Adelaide win. I don't find Hrgović the most likable. I find him quite arrogant and quite lazy at times. Nick Ball, big Nick Ball fan, as we know, I'm sure you all are. If you haven't, you have to be a supremely good boxer to keep Nick Ball away and not take damage all night. And I don't think this guy has got that. Saying that, I think Nick Ball showed better technical ability sort of before he won the world title. I thought he used his skills a lot more. I do think he's become a bit of a blunt force trauma walk forward wrecking ball, i.e. the nickname. And I think he's a lot better fighter than that. I think he's a lot more of a polished fighter than that. I think he's got a lot more technical ability than he's shown since winning the world title. So I've picked Nick Ball, but I'd love to see him display more of his repertoire because he has got it. He's a beautifully schooled fighter and he can do things wonderfully well from a technical point of view. And I don't think he's shown that recently. I just think he's won his fights by sheer strength, sheer brute force, and that's how he's won fights. And I'd like to see him display the ability that we've seen him display previous and the ability that I know he has got. So I hope we do see, you know, less of the wrecking ball for me. You know, that's great. But I think he's got skills as well and tons of technical ability, which we haven't seen much of recently. Anyway, I'll see you all soon.